Welcome to the Four Visions Market Podcast, a space built on the principles of integrity and reciprocity. Together, we will engage in thought-provoking conversations about plant medicines, why these plants are coming out of the rainforests, jungles, and mountains after thousands of years, and what it means to be in right relationship with the ancestral wisdom cultures and guardians of these traditions. I'm your host, Mariah Ganessa, founder and director of Four Visions Market. This podcast is the natural evolution in our commitment to providing you, our tribe, with incredible resources to support you on your healing journey through plant medicines. Welcome home. Welcome back, Soul Tribe, and thanks for tuning in. Today on the podcast, we are stoked to welcome Adi Shakti. Adi helps spiritual leaders passionate about social justice fine-tune their skills in facilitation so that they can better serve vulnerable communities with integrity and impact. Adi is the founder of Soulwork and has trained over 3,000 yoga teachers in the Soulwork method. She is the founder of Soulwork Live and producer of Soulwork, the film. She specializes in supporting guides and facilitators in fine-tuning their skills through a trauma-informed lens. In today's episode, Adi and I sit down to have a very real conversation on all things service, activating our fullest potential, and sacred sustainable commerce. We discuss how to be in cultural exchange in a way that creates unity and brings mutual benefit for all parties involved, what true service is, what it is not, and how to be in awareness when relating to other people's cultures and communities. How to engage in the material world in a way that can be beneficial and works towards the greater vision of humanity for a new type of economy based on abundance and thriving. We also discuss the path of the entrepreneur as part of the spiritual path and what it means to be leaders in a new paradigm of commerce and exchange of goods and services. This conversation was super fun for Adi and I hope you enjoy it too.
A quick word from our sponsors before we begin this episode.
This episode is brought to you by Magic Fund Amazon. Four Visions Market is proud to be in partnership with Magic Fund, a nonprofit organization that works as a movement for Amazonian growth and Indigenous cultures. Magic Fund focuses primarily in the Putumayo region of the Colombian Amazon, spearheading various initiatives that focus on the preservation of Indigenous culture, land, and the health of the traditional peoples that live there. Magic Fund recently launched a new campaign that is called Planting Magic. Through this initiative, we are currently fundraising to be able to steward 50 hectares of land in the Colombian Amazon in order to plant and reforest the land with native endangered medicinal plant species. We believe that these sacred plants, if conserved and protected, can bring forth healing for all of humanity in the generations to come. Like many places in the world, the Amazon is under constant threat of encroachment. 17% of the Amazon rainforest has been lost in the last 50 years. An increased interest in the healing benefits of these plants threatens their survival. As these ancestral plants continue to come out of the jungle to be shared with the West, the dire need to plant and replant these medicines becomes more and more apparent. So we invite you to join us in planting magic and leaving a legacy for the future generations so that these medicines continue to accompany humanity for many years to come. Visit Magic Fund Amazon to learn more and to join the movement. Welcome, Adi. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's great to see you again and to have you on for this beautiful conversation today.
I'm so thankful to be here with you. And yes, looking forward to diving in and sharing any gold I can. So thank you so much for hosting me.
Yay. So I always like to start these conversations with an introduction, to who you are for those of you those of our listeners who may not be familiar with who you are and the work that you do. But if we could take it from this frame of how you met your entrepreneurial spirit and how your journey to entrepreneurialism really started, and we can let that be kind of the framework from which you share a little bit about who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So right after college, so my academic background is in social justice and humanitarian work. And the philosophy of social justice was my formal degree. And in my academic life, I did a lot of give back. I went to school in Chicago, and I spent a lot of time in the prisons and in battered women's shelters, and really did a lot of outreach. And once I graduated from college, I immediately moved to Costa Rica, which is how you and I eventually connected. And there I was working with a rural community in the Southern Caribbean, and also got involved with some advocacy and fundraising for different projects for the Bribri community there. And with that foundation, I began working as a very young woman for an organization that specialized in humanitarian travel. So basically, we would different projects around the world that we had ongoing relationships with would require funding. And our job was basically to do the fundraising. And then we would take the funders to see the projects that we had taken care of in these different places. And this is all around the world. This is in Guatemala, in Costa Rica, Thailand, Cambodia, India. So I spent a lot of my early years learning about what works, what doesn't with humanitarian work. My yoga journey is also woven throughout that story. And I was working for someone else, and I got to this point where I really needed to move and breathe and be on my own terms. I had learned what I needed to learn, and I really felt that it was time for me to take my own steps to put together a project that really fused all of my passion. So the yoga teachings and philosophy, as well as this humanitarian element and give back. And at that point in my career, I'd also really established a beautiful relationship with the Bribri community there in Costa Rica, and I wanted to find ways to give back there. And so I was 24 when I founded what was then Passion Yoga School and is now Soul Work. So I'm coming up on 10 years now of this journey, but that was kind of the tipping point for me. I was so blessed with early mentors and really getting the support that I needed. And it just became clear to me that if I was going to operate at my potential as a creative, as a woman, as a spiritual being, that I really needed to wake up every day and do what I wanted. So that shift came, and it was scary, but here we are 10 years later, still plugging along. And yes, I'm super thankful. So
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. First of all, congratulations on the 10-year mark because it's a big one. And you really are a firecracker. You have so much passion and drive. And I've seen it, in the years that I've known you, the way in which you really do show up every day and keep going, keep bringing the work and the offerings to the world in this desire to truly be of service. And your heart really comes through, your authenticity. And it's a really beautiful thing, the way that you're showing up for your community and for the world. I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit more. When did you know you wanted your life to be for more than just yourself? Was there like a tipping point or a crucial moment when you started thinking beyond what Adi wanted for her life and more for how you could bring your gifts to the forefront to be in greater service to humanity and to the world?
yeah, I think I've done this for many lives. And I think that really that became clear to me as a child because there was a lot of loss in my family when I was very young. So my family we have babies at 20. So the generations are very tight. I'm kind of the first one to break that. So when I was born, I had all of my grandparents. I had most of my great grandparents and remarriages and close family with cousins and aunts and uncles and all the things, which is beautiful. And I really was introduced to deep grief from a very, very young age. And I feel that when you experience that and process through that it just starts to bring up these deeper philosophical questions around what life is and why we're here and what we're supposed to do with it and what this is all about. And also having lost pillars of my family, my life focus started to shift into what would really make them proud. and carrying on the lineage and these kinds of things. And so really, I think that, even just through middle school and high school, I was always wanting to volunteer. And I also grew up in a pretty high poverty community. I was a minority growing up, actually, in an all Black and Latino school. Not all, but definitely was the minority group. And so there was a lot of, I was just hyper aware of these social justice elements and poverty and, friends that were selling drugs and out of jail. And so I think it was like a blend of all of these parts of my early story that really encouraged me to look outside myself and see how I could channel my gifts to be of service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, you have done a lot of different work in many different facets of service and giving back. You've been in communities where you're doing hands-on work. You've had the opportunity to really get deep into, each community and what they're needing and what they're wanting to bring forth, and be able to utilize your platform and your service to amplify that and activate that. And one of the big topics that we talk about on this podcast is what it truly means to be in this concept of right relationship, and what it means to be in service, but not from a place of being the savior. And I would love to hear, some of your reflections on what you've learned throughout your years working all over the world with many different communities and all different backgrounds, as far as any teachings that you have to share or insights that you have to share on what it means to show up and desire to be giving back, but to do so in a way that's not imposing your own privilege and your own desire to be that savior that comes in and makes everything better for a community that has already had such a long history of oppression and being told that they don't know what they need as a tribe or as a village or as a community.
Mm-hmm. So that reminds me of a story. And I think it's a summary of my early mindset that has shifted, of course, so much as I've matured. But really, I think it symbolizes this greater issue with white saviorism and all of these things. And I remember when I was a little girl, after the rain, I would go outside with my shoebox and I would put dirt in the shoebox, and I would find the worms that had gotten out onto the street, out on my street. And I would go and I would collect all the worms and I would put them in my shoebox. And with all the love in my heart as a little girl, I thought that I was saving them, right? And perhaps I saved a couple from inevitable death by an SUV or whatever. But all of those worms that I tried to save shriveled up and died almost, within a day or two, right? So I think that there's this attitude of going in to communities or into projects with the best of intentions, and it can get really messy. And I've learned so much, and we have trainings on this and trauma-informed leadership and, proper action and karma yoga and all. There's so many different layers to this. There's the element of international give back. And I know with you in particular, this being of service to Indigenous communities and being a part of that, which is especially tender, all the way to even going into inner city schools or even just within the United States, as someone from the United States myself, going into different kinds of communities. There's, ethics that it's all over the place. And I've been so blessed that I've been able to have all kinds of different experiences. But the thing that I think has proven, there's two things that I want to speak about. One is that, early in Costa Rica, when I first came to Costa Rica and I had my first project there, I went in with an S on my chest and I was going to save the world and I was going to teach them, all of these things, and I was going to teach them English and I was going to teach them, all of these things. And I think that something that's happened really uniquely within Costa Rica or within some of the other Indigenous communities that I've had the honor of working with is that there's been this process slowly of adding shame to the Indigenous wisdom. So a lot of times the children, and maybe you've come across this, but the children want to speak Spanish, like it's not even cool to speak their Indigenous language. And they're losing, in a lot of the communities that I've been in touch with, they're losing their language, they're losing the wisdom of the plants, they're losing with the younger generations. The older generations, the abuelos and all of that, a lot of times still have it, but it's rapidly, that this wisdom is rapidly being lost. And so they're in this place where they used to be able to, cure themselves with the jungle, and they used to really have this profound connection with the earth. And then there's this introduction of capitalism, but they don't have the tools to really participate in that system either. So then they're kind of in this limbo, which I know you in the marketplace have been so powerful in providing an avenue to thrive in an environment like this. But they're kind of in this place where they can't really participate in capitalism because they don't have the skills, and they're losing their Indigenous language and their Indigenous foundations, which puts them in like a new kind of poverty that's really new just to these last couple of generations, because they don't necessarily understand how to take care of the land and these things in the ways that they used to. And so I've seen this with the Kofan people in Ecuador. I've seen this with the Bribri people of Costa Rica, and some different groups in Guatemala as well. And what I have found in my work with Indigenous groups is that it's really important for me and my role to be a bridge, and that we need to have some sort of leadership or representative of that community that is making the decisions for what is best for that community. And then it's my job as the outsider that cares to be the advocate, or to do the fundraising, or to kind of play my role in our culture to amplify the desires of that leadership. So with a Bribri in Costa Rica, for example, there was a junta or a board that we would sit down with, and all of the decisions were made by the community. And that's something that's really important, because what I found is that it's, to walk into a community and to look around and to think that, what they need is incredibly violent. And a lot of times it's a waste of resources, because it's not even, it's like the classic fallacy of, going into a tribe, and it's a nomadic tribe and you don't know that, but you invest in a well, for example. It's like the idea is, yes, if I give them water, then they'll thrive, which is great. But a nomadic tribe is just going to abandon the well. So there has to be a intimate relationship with the culture and the subtleties of the culture to be in a position to actually be helpful. So I think that having an established relationship is important. And the work that we did in Costa Rica as well, I would put volunteers out at a project that we had started in collaboration with the junta. But it was Latinas and Latinos that we would put out there as volunteers. We really stayed away from putting gringos out in the villages. And it's a reframe. It's being involved to the extent that you're able to be helpful, but having the self-awareness to know when it's time to get support from the leadership. But yeah, there's so many layers, and that's just, with Indigenous communities. But so to speak that, so the 2 points: one, see yourself as a bridge and be in meaningful relationship with leadership that's actually making the decisions. And 2 is that in order to be the most helpful, like hands-on helpful, it's best to serve in communities that you actually have experience with, or that you identify with in a way. So, I've had friends that have experienced addiction that are really impactful in rehabilitation clinics. If you don't have that background or that experience, then the likelihood of you actually being able to touch true compassion and empathy in an environment like that is going to be kind of difficult. In my experience going into prisons, I had a lot of friends that had that experience. And so I am able very quickly to establish rapport with people who come from that kind of background. And sometimes I see people kind of trying to serve or give back in an environment where they don't have context, and ultimately it's violent. So those would be kind of the two takeaways: is the bridge, and if you are going to be hands-on, then have some qualities or some experience of that particular focus group, for lack of a better word. But yeah, that would be my piece there.
Mm. Thank you so much for that. And there's so many different layers that you touched upon and really so resonant for me in the work that we're doing, and so I really thank you for that. And ultimately, one of the things, this element of awareness that you mentioned, it's so important because when you're working with these different groups, there's so many different delicate layers that you're working with, and to really take the time to understand the dynamics and what's at play and what are their needs as well as their desires, right? Because what we might be observing, like you're saying, of what they need is oftentimes not what they're wanting at that moment in time. And when you were talking, it really reminded me of our work with the health brigade that we've been doing in Putumayo in the southern region of Colombia, with the indigenous people in Putumayo, because we had this idea that we would bring all these different types of treatments, alternative medicine therapies, and botanical remedies from their people to support them and offer them to them. And what they were most interested in was nutrition. And so it's also to really be willing to listen and be open to hearing, like, from the depths of what they're needing, to be able to be in greatest service and really meet them where they're at in their evolution. And you were touching on this really important topic as well regarding this loss of valuing of their own ways and their own culture, which is very present and prevalent in the work that we're doing. And the bridge that work that we're doing, and like you said, offering a marketplace where they can participate in the economy and in capitalism, but in a way that gives an element where they can return back to their traditional medicines, where the young ones are now starting to have a desire in learning their language and learning their ancestral practices, studying with their traditional medicine makers, and learning the ways how to make their art and their medicines, because they're actually seeing that there's a value for that. And so we're in this really beautiful time within the indigenous communities of South America that we're in partnership with, because over the last really 5-10 years, there's been like this shift from desire to educate themselves in, Western education so much, because there was a lot of indoctrination that in order to have any sort of success, they had to leave their villages and go and get higher education outside of the communities. And so they're now starting to remember once again and value their ancestral wisdom once again. And so it's been such a beautiful thing, and really everything that you're sharing has been very integral in my journey as well as in the work that we're doing. And it's a constant, checking. Like, we're constantly having to check ourselves and check our initiative, make sure that we're in alignment, make sure that the work that we're doing is truly what they're wanting to see come through, in order to be that vehicle. And so it's been such a beautiful journey, and I can tell, your desire to bring that forth and has been really a big navigating aspect of the development of your life's work and your mission. So, with that, I would love to hear a little bit more about the evolution into your offering, and how this work with activism, this work with service, has really laid the foundation for you finding your role and your community that you wanted to serve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to share one story. I'll dive into that. And I did just want to share one thing, because I think that I've been blessed to have a lot of conversations around, service work. And, there are all of these beautiful elements and all of these teachings. And sometimes it is, and I feel like it's important for listeners and for people to know and understand, it can be so challenging. And I have been stretched internally, ethically, to my capacity as a guide and teacher and advocate. And I just wanted to, give an example of, we had a situation where our volunteers were present in a community, and there was a celebration party for the volunteers, and they invited the young man to come, not the young woman. It was with the men, and they were drinking chicha, which is a traditional alcohol made from sugarcane. I'm sure you're familiar, for the listeners. And one of the men, as a gift, which is very common in all kinds of different indigenous cultures around the world, offered his daughter to our volunteer for the night as a thank you for his service to the community.
Wow.
And of course, our volunteer denied. But you get into these ethical dilemmas of, this little girl, likely not the first time that this has happened. She's a very young child. And what is your ethical responsibility as someone that's aware of something like that happening? Because from our perspective, it's wrong. And it's something that's very much so ingrained into their culture. And so it's interesting because I think that there's beauty and subtleties and cultural differences. And then every once in a while, you get something where the conflict is so strong in terms of ethics and values. And it can be really, really difficult to navigate, which I think is why it's so important as well. Like in that particular situation, I turned to my Costa Rican family and leadership to see what the next steps would be, and had a lot of discourses around, what would be best in that situation. And even, with something like what's happening in Costa Rica now with all of this development, and, for example, in Puerto Viejo, there's been this push from the foreign community that lives there to protect the indigenous culture, to protect the jungle. Like these are very like Western, there's beauty in this kind of new age Western push to prioritize these values. But the locals that live there want development and economic opportunity, so it's really interesting when you start to get into these complex ethics of, is the new age Western desire a higher value than what the locals of the area want. And there's so many different kind of layers to all of it. So I think it's I just want to make sure that, in having a conversation, that just to mention how much this stretches and breathes, and that there's so many different subtleties and all of these things. So I just wanted to name that, because it's
Well, thank you.
Really,
That's
yeah.
it's important. And also, expanding a little bit on that, if you could share like because that's an extreme example, right? With the offering of his young child. And so with the differing of values, when we're going in and there's an exchange of cultures, I think one of the beautiful things is that we are all evolving. We're all sharing. It's a sharing of all cultures, right? So, when the indigenous communities or any community shares with another community, there is an exchange happening, and they're both getting to receive and give. So this is the element of this reciprocity, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of growth. That's the beauty of evolution, because to say that we want that these tribes are going to be preserved in the way that they have lived for thousands of years, that's naive as well, because like you mentioned, there's already this desire to participate more in an economy system, to leave the tribe and explore, to travel, to see other places, right? This is normal. This is part of our human evolution at this time in the planet where we're living, when there's movement, and there's exchange of information, there's exchange of people and places, right? So it's about holding this vision for the future of what the future can look like when we are engaging in this reciprocity and exchange with respect, and with this common goal of unity for all of humanity, right? So I'm curious, if you could explain and elaborate a little bit on that side of things, from your experience, because let's just be honest, that example you just threw out, that's gonna sit with a lot of the listeners. They're gonna be thinking about that, right? So I don't think we can just like move on past that one, right? We have to stay there for a minute.
Yeah, it's I think that it's really interesting, because I see sometimes that there is this like new age holistic, and there's an element of elitism even though it's not intended, but there is this kind of perspective of this new wave that we're seeing in Western culture, and kind of this, it's been a subculture, but now it's becoming more and more mainstream. And it's really interesting when you start to see the impact that it's having globally. And in so many ways, like you just shared, it's so beautiful because it's this desire for, cultural respect and preservation and cultural exchange. And there's these beautiful conversations happening around the ethics. And I see that, as a member of this community myself, to have spent time with Indigenous communities, as I know you have as well, it's so beautiful. And the language and the culture and the dance and the food and the ritual and the organization of the household and the myths and the origin stories and the jewelry and the plant medicine and the stories related to all of the different animals and all of these things. Like, it's just this beautiful tapestry. And I feel like sometimes there is this attachment to preservation because there's like this guilt that underlies that, as well as being part of the dominant culture that's stripped a lot of this away. But it's really interesting when you see an Indigenous person of a community like that wants to be out in the world and travel and exchange and learn and speak different languages and grow and have a business and all of these things. And there's like this elitist new age model of like, no, like stay in the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's really fascinating to have those conversations and to kind of check again, just continuing, like you said, like you just have to continue to check yourself. And what is your ego, and what is it that you're trying to preserve, and what is guilt, and what is saviorism, and what is true detached service.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many subtleties to this. And I have found that in my own work, that it's chipping at the ego, deep listening, chipping at the ego, noticing where I'm clinging, where I'm have my own agenda, even if it's in the name of saving the worms, or this like desire to help. But there's this toxicity to this colonial mindset that we just have to continue to check our privilege. Like, it just shows up, and then you think you've shed it, and then it hits again in a different capacity. And yeah, it's a really fascinating process. And for me, it's been about becoming more and more hands off and really seeing myself. And this is also because there's just other things in my life and career. I was really deep into this. It's been some years. But to be an advocate and a bridge where, we have representatives of the community that share what the needs are, and I do my best to advocate. And that's kind of where I am in my career in terms of most of my humanitarian work, where I was very much so in the mud of it for a long time. But I do find that a degree of separation is healthiest for the community, even though I want to be there, and sometimes that's not what's best, So yeah, there's a lot to say. There's so many subtleties, and I know, there's not many people on this planet that I could even have this conversation with. I'm so lucky to be sitting here with you, because I know you see and understand a lot of what I'm sharing. But there's, as we dive deeper into relationship, these different layers continue to come up.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, okay, let's stay on one more question here, and then we'll kind of transition into soul work. So for our listeners who have, a relationship with the plants and these Indigenous communities through these tools that they have come into contact with, for someone who perhaps has never traveled to these places, has never come into direct contact with these tribes, from your direct experience, what is the best way that one could work with these medicines and be really in this place of right relationship? And how can someone begin this journey of wanting to be in service without, needing to go in and right away get their hands in the projects and on the ground for if they can or cannot, right? So based off of what we can do, for someone living perhaps in the United States who's come into contact with these botanical healing tools and their lives have changed. They've received healing and they have received direct benefit from these medicines and these ancestral wisdom cultures, but they're just beginning to embark in this journey. What would you say to them as far as what they could do?
Yeah. So I think that for me personally, my path is the path of the Nat Shiv yoga practitioner. And so I will say that the indigenous medicines are not a part of my spiritual practice. So I don't know that I'm the best to answer that question. I have had experiences and I have spent some time in Colombia with you and I have worked with Hape and I have, had some experiences and I do not want to misrepresent myself as, I've supported the culture in different ways, but the medicines are not my spiritual path. So just to name that. And I think that a way to answer that though, I have my teacher that I am devoted to and seek counsel from, and am on a path where I'm able to get guidance throughout my life from a very clear path. And that's really important and has added a lot of value to my life. So I think for people that are listening that have found their spiritual path, whatever that is, whatever medicine or culture has really ignited healing in your spirit, that you remain devoted and unwavering, even when there is discomfort or resistance. And that if you are blessed to have found a teacher and a lineage that supports you deeply to stay the course. So that would be one thing that I would say. The other thing that I would say in terms of actually being of support to that community, and for me, for India, my spiritual discipline has foundations in northern India in the foothills of the Himalaya. And also, a lot of the work that I've done with my company has been in Costa Rica. And so it's felt important for me, especially as a Westerner, to also show up in terms of, financial support and having that relationship with the source of to give back, right? Not only to take the spiritual fruits from these areas, but to also give back. And for me in my life, that has very much so looked like a financial relationship of supporting, the children and the women of the communities from which we exchange, because the resources that I have access to are different than the resources they've offered me, but they're beneficial. And so it's a way for me not just to take, but to also give. And I think that's some things that's so beautiful, Mariah, about what you do is you're providing an avenue for people to give back to those communities. And so for those of you that are listening that, have sat in ceremony, or have a relationship with these medicines, to know the source of where these tools are coming from, and that you're working with an ethically sourced business that has their hearts in the best interest of those that are offering those medicines, is absolutely an extremely powerful way for you to feel an integrity as a Westerner in a cultural exchange with these tools. It's not just a taking, it's a giving and a receiving. And as Westerners, we have a different medium that we have access to that can be really helpful in terms of healthcare and education and opportunity and skills training and housing. There's so much beautiful work that can be done. So I think, just by virtue of listening to this podcast or being connected to Mariah and her organization, or for those that are, within soul work in my community, they move in integrity. You all move in integrity, knowing that you're plugged in to a community that's led by someone who truly cares, who has their hands in the mud and is committed to checking themselves and continuing to find powerful ways to give back to the origin source, which is rare. It's rare to find that. It's not easy to find that. So those of you that are listening are already so blessed to have a way to plug in so meaningfully. And I think, just to continue to look for that as you continue on your walk, I think is really valuable.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I loved that response and, making it so much wider than just the plant medicines and just the culture of the Amazon because, it's so true, right? This is medicine. This is how we can approach any sort of cultural exchange as well as how we can be in today's world with the resources that we have in a place of awareness and reciprocity. And I thank you so much for that answer because it really set the groundwork for where I think I want to go in this conversation now with this concept of ethical commerce and ethical sustainability and what it means to be in the world in a new way, in a way that holds a vision for everything that we've been talking about, this concept of, of being in relationship with all of humanity, of the earth, of walking our time upon this earth with consciousness, with reverence for life and for this gift, this blessing of what it means to be in these bodies and on this earth. And so, for many of us walking a spiritual path, this becomes a big topic of how to engage in this material world in a way that can be beneficial, right? And in a way that can be beneficial, not just for us, but in a way that works towards this greater vision of what we are holding for this new paradigm, for lack of a better word, like a vision that we're working towards, as a global humanity, as a global economy. And, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast is because I feel that the work that you're doing with soul work and your trajectory of your life is very much rooted in this same vision that we're cultivating here at Four Visions. And so for us, this concept of what we're doing is much bigger than just these tools and these products that we're serving, because we believe that at this time in humanity's evolution, a new way needs to be exemplified, a new way needs to be demonstrated of how to engage, because we're not going to go backwards, right? We're only going forward. So this concept of a money-based economy, it's going to evolve, but it's there in some way or another, right? We're not going to go back to exchanging a loaf of bread for, a carton of eggs, for lack of a better example. So essentially, we're here in this time, and to come to terms with it in a way that we can utilize it for generation of abundance and thriving for all beings on this planet. And so my question to you is, how do you take that and bring it into soul work, and maybe introduce soul work a little bit now for those who are new to your platform, but essentially how this concept of ethical exchange of information, of ethical exchange of services has been a foundational pillar for you bringing forth your work in your platform into the world.
Mm-hmm. So I love this new wave of entrepreneurship, and I feel that our generation is creating such a beautiful model. And I know that for my parents or for my grandparents, there's this model of give back. And you have your two pockets, and one pocket is the money that you use to take care of your needs. And the other pocket is where you do your give back, and to have those two things separate. And I think that the mark of social entrepreneurship and of companies like ours and where we're headed collectively, which I think is really exciting, is this idea of being able to fuse both of those, that you're able to simultaneously spend money on things that you desire and need, and also for the company to be in a position that also is giving back in a powerful way, right? And so this has been front and center before I even started Soul Work, the organization that I worked with before, the Village Experience, just a little shout out. But these ideas really came from working with Kelly Campbell, who was my boss / mentor at the time. But really understanding this around responsible travel, and then also going into services and products, how people that are investing are able to have a phenomenal experience and also know that they're supporting, a sustainable business model. And so for me with Soul Work, it's been a long road. There's 10 years of stories that I could pull from, but I started with trainings, yoga teacher trainings in Costa Rica. And I took so much pride and take so much pride in making sure that the money that comes into our organization is also supporting the communities where we dwell. And so in 2017, we transitioned to the Soul Work Jungle Ashram in Puerto Viejo and have since transitioned out, but we had a good run there. But just to give an example where, people are coming in for the 3-week training and it's local hands on, preparing the food, and we're being conscious about where we're sourcing the food from, and it's container housing and compost toilets, and making sure that we are, in union with the earth. And there's a percentage of the income from the training that's going back into the Indigenous community, and we're sourcing the cacao locally, and we're working, with the blessing of the Bribri as we're moving into our cacao ceremony, and we're having a local Costa Rican that's facilitating ceremony, and just really all of these things that we've been talking about. Just how is it that we're able to weave this into the tapestry of our companies? Mm-hmm. And so Soul Work, we started in Costa Rica, and we've also led retreats and programs all around the world. We have our annual India pilgrimage as well, where we take people back into the ashram where I studied, and the members of our community, they're able to meet my teacher. We go to the school. We've built a couple of classrooms there. We're able to, just to see how participating in Soul Work and through our organization, the impact that we've been able to have mostly, in Costa Rica and in India. But this is woven, even now with the digital trainings. I mean, our team, how I treat my faculty, how I treat my team, how we organize our entire structure and format, comes back to asking these questions of how we can be of highest service, and doing things ethically in a way that feels fair and in alignment. And, this is something that I'm always coming back to and modifying as my organization grows.
I love it because ultimately, we have these resources. And so what we're choosing to invest in, what we're choosing to purchase with these resources, it makes such a big difference in furthering this vision of this new way of commerce forward, right? And so the people who are really believing in this and holding this are with us, amplifying these different projects, these different companies, supporting the businesses that are upholding this. And little by little, it's happening, right? There's a desire, there's a value of that coming into society more and more, and it's really starting to become tangible, right? It's really starting to come through that this is actually possible. This way that perhaps for our parents' generation was like a pipe dream is now truly manifesting before our eyes, and we're playing a part in it. So for me, it's been such an honor, and it's also become more and more apparent what a great responsibility it is, because one wrong foot or one choice that's not in that place of complete integrity and complete alignment could blow up the whole prayer of what this is, not just for visions, but for this vision that we're holding as a collective at this time. And so, yeah, it's been so beautiful to watch Soul Work grow and evolve, and you've had many different transitions and evolutions. I know for one big one was when you took everything online and you really, said yes to the online world. And if you want to share a little bit, like what that was like for you, and if there was any internal struggle when it came to transitioning to the technological world, on a greater capacity, and how that process was for you, as well as just like in your decisions, how you've made your decisions along the way, and how this whole evolution has been guided by this greater prayer and desire to really bring into manifestation this concept that we're talking about.
Yes. The 2020 transition. What a transition it was. I was in a puddle on the floor. I thought everything was over. It was terrifying. It was absolutely a death. But, we started in 2014 and everything that we did was in person. We had our 200-hour and added a 300-hour and prenatal and trauma-informed and business training and all the things, and everything was in person. And then our India pilgrimage, and then 2020 hit. And of course, everything fell apart. And so we did everything online. And then we added all of our programs online in Spanish as well, which was a big undertaking. And yes, there was a explosion of excitement, and which I really needed to kind of push through all of the work. Or just even using that word push through is something that I've evolved from in this last year, really. But yeah, it took a lot of energy and time and devotion to switch it all over. But now we have everything online, and then starting, we still have in-person events as well. But we've shifted now to where we have one big in-person event in Mexico now, actually in Cabo, every February. And we're working on scaling that event up. It was so beautiful this year. This was our first year, and it was just the Trauma Informed Leadership Conference. It was incredible. And so we have our big Cabo event, and then we have our India pilgrimage in November of every year. And then this year, 2023, is our last 200-hour in Costa Rica this July.
Wow.
But we have a new home on the Pacific side. It is a luxurious experience, which was a big shift for the brand, but it's so beautiful. And so we have that this July. And then, yes, every single month we have a different training within Soulwork. So students can opt in to take one training, or they can sign up. We have different bundles, or we have membership as well, where you can do all of our trainings throughout the course of the year. But now we have, yes, all of our in-person trainings are now virtual. And then we've even added additional ones. We have Kundalini 1 and Kundalini 1, Kundalini 2, Meditation 1, Meditation 2. We have Trauma 1, Trauma 2, the 300-hour Ayurveda, mystical sciences, restorative, prenatal. It just goes on and on. So we have all kinds of beautiful digital offerings, and then our 2 primary in-person events. And that's how we have the structure now. And it's just, I love it. I love it. And it's been challenging for me to find kind of the equilibrium of peace and clarity and stability. But I think that these last couple of years, kind of the intensity and the chaos for me and who I am was necessary. And then now I really feel like we're on this new beautiful track of so much momentum and clarity. But yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a long journey with some bumps in the road. But yeah, I'm so thankful for where we are now and where we're headed. So.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I was looking at all your courses yesterday, and you do have such an incredible, extensive collection. And so there's really something for everyone there, and what an incredible resource for people who are doing this soul's work, right? And anyone who is new to Adi and her platform, really highly recommend that you check it out, because she's the real deal. And these offerings are have so much depth to them, and really are so supportive to anyone wherever you are in your spiritual journey. So thank you for doing the incredible work that you're doing and all that you are, Adi.
Oh, you inspire me, Mariah. And I wish that maybe in another time or another life, we'll have the space to really cultivate a friendship and spend a lot more time together, and even just walking parallel and where we've cross paths, and just bearing witness to your evolution even from afar has just been such an inspiration for me, and your journey into motherhood and killing it in the business and doing it all with so much heart. And yes, you inspire me, so thank you so much.
Thank you, my love. Okay, one more question for our listeners. I would love to have you share, because the entrepreneurial spirit is very much linked with the spiritual path. I think there's an element of entrepreneurism that calls to many people when they're taking this journey of awakening, of reclaiming their sovereignty, reclaiming their bodies, reclaiming their souls, their essence, their mission on this path. And so one of the things that I love about entrepreneurism is that it's provided a really beautiful container for me to grow spiritually, my capacity in the way in which I can actualize my gifts, actualize my fullest potential. And so, for those listening who may feel called to take that leap or have been thinking about it, praying about it for some time, about how they can actualize this and bring this forth, and maybe have some awareness of what their medicine is, their gift is, but haven't yet taken that step to bringing it forth in a concrete way. What advice would you have for that person?
I feel that it has so much to do with your constitution, and I think that you and I would answer that question very differently, which I think is beautiful. And for me, and for if I were speaking to myself back in that era of life, it's jump and then build the plane. And I think that a lot of people, though, that's not the way. It takes a lot more consideration and foresight and sitting with yourself and really connecting in with clarity and integrity, which is so important. And for me, I really, being fire myself, stepping into that fire. And I loved so much how you spoke about this stretching of capacity, because that's really what business does. Especially as your business grows, it's like bigger problems, bigger responsibilities, bigger mental fluctuations, and this learning of, with increased responsibility, how to build the emotional intelligence to hold what it is that you've created. And for me, it's a lot of times it's been about pushing myself and stretching myself before I was quite ready, and then kind of catching up with my emotional and spiritual intelligence after the fact. And I know that some people perhaps, really benefit, like you have a foundation of capacity and emotional intelligence and the ability to calm yourself and come to your medicine and come to your practice. And you can build the business kind of as you develop that way. So I think it really depends on, and those of you listening, it's like, are you fire, or are you air? Are you earth? Are you slower moving? Like, to really know yourself, but also to know that, sometimes for me personally, taking a step before I feel quite ready, or starting up the staircase before I see the full staircase, I mean, it's kind of the way that it goes. So I think that, to start walking and to find community. I think that's something too that I really lived isolated as a pioneer, and I had martyrdom. Like, I was proud of that. It's like everybody that I worked with had gone through my trainings. Everyone that I was around was kind of a step or two behind in terms of actualizing their creative potential. And it was really heavy. And the moment that I started putting myself in rooms with people that were actually doing better than I was, and in different areas of my life where I wanted to grow, things really shifted for me in terms of, just not feeling isolated. So I think for any of you that are listening that hear yourself in my voice, jump and find people that are doing better than you and hang out with them. And that would be my advice. And if you don't hear yourself in my voice, then do not listen to me. Find someone that you do and listen to them.
Thank you. I love it. And it's funny because you're right. We would have answered it differently, but at this point in my career, I would probably say jump either way, honestly, because the world needs this, And so to get out of your own way and to get out of your own inhibitions and just move forward on that. And like you said, everything will fall into place. You will cultivate the skills that you need by just taking that first step forward. And oftentimes we can spend 10, 20 years thinking about that first step, but if we don't really ever take it, then nothing's ever going to happen, right? And so I feel that there is a sense of urgency in the sense of where we're at as a planet and as humanity, that this medicine that is coming forth in this generation, it's so needed, that there, from a place of grace, from a place of peace and clarity and centeredness, there is urgency, to go with clarity and focus and to move forward into the world with our offerings and gifts. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being that and for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure and a sweet connection. So thank you, my sister. And with that, is there anything else that you want to leave with us, with our listeners?
No, just thank you so much. And I know that Mariah, in the show notes, I'm sure somewhere there's a opportunity and invitation to take one of our programs for free, Soulwork 101. And so if you have resonated or are curious in walking further with me, then that's a really, really beautiful place to start. And yeah, just to thank you, Mariah. And, and I shared, and I'll say it again and again and again, but I'm just so proud of you. And even though we haven't spoken much, I've seen what you have navigated in the ways that I can, and you have just blossomed and continued to blossom and rise. And I'm just, it's been just a joy to watch your journey. And I'm so proud of you and your business and the work that you're doing. And it's just been an absolute honor to have this time to share space. So thank you so much. And keep going. You're doing a great job. I know we need to hear it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Right back at you, sister.
Thank you. Thank you. Love me.
Yes.
From everyone at the Four Visions Market family, we would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. We really hope that you've enjoyed the conversation and gained many new insights on plant medicines, ancestral wisdom, and much more. Please remember to visit our website at www.fourvisionsmarket.com for more resources and information on plant medicine and spiritual tools. And please don't forget to follow us across social media for regular updates on upcoming episodes. We are grateful for your support and look forward to continuing this path with you all. Until next time, take care, stay present, and stay connected.